Okay, so we're at the spray bay now and got it down, and we've been around it and we've just done a couple of other little bits and pieces. These areas at the front of the engine nauticals themselves, they've been painted black, so I forgot to do those. Should have done those at the same time as we did all the de-icing boots and everything else like that. All looking really nice, so now we can start on with the decaling. Now I've already started on the underside. You might be able to see a few going on underneath there like that. What I tend to do is I tend to have a look to see how the decal is going to react with different types of softening agents and things like that. Because obviously different manufacturers tend to have different ones. Some are harder, some are softer and things like that. So anyway, Micro, Set and Sol are my usual choice for it. But with these, they do tend to be very, very matte in finish with Revell type thing. So what I tend to prefer on that is to use actually an acrylic thinner. X20A I find works great. They do tend to shrink and shrivel up quite a bit, so just don't touch them. When you put them down, leave them to it. So we're just going to show you some of the tricky ones we've got here. Obviously, when you're working with long areas, this is the walkway ones that are going to be down the entire length of the wing. The trouble with these is when you're doing them, you tend to get curves, they roll up, things like that. So what we can actually do, we've got some warm water here. Okay, I've got 2 on the go for going down the wing. So what we're going to do, I've got some spring-loaded clips here. So what we're going to do is just pop it down in the water, just down in here. And what we're going to do is place it as best as I can, because obviously the tray's not quite big enough, but face down, as in the backing paper to the top. This stops it curling up and basically shattering the decal, things like that. Usual thing, once it's gone a little bit floppy, you should be able to place it in there no problem. Okay, and it'll be okay. We're not going to let it sit in there for sort of, 5 minutes, something like that. We're just give it a little dunk, then we're going to pull it up. Okay, and then we're just going to place it and lay it down on the surface, just down here like this. Now, it's a bit tricky doing all of this because it's such a large model and I can't really zoom you in to show you the actual areas. So what we're going to do is just place it down, and every now and again we're just going to grab the decal and give it a little nudge, but you want to basically make sure it's all off and flowing okay. So clean brush into the water and we'll just give it another little run around. Now this one here is going to go down this wing, so if we just zoom you in a little bit, you can see what we've got. So we're going to work our way down here. So if we just bring this over a little bit, as I say, just try and keep it flat, don't move it around too much. Now the way that the walkway lines work on this is that the hatching points outwards. You have a yellow bar on the inside and you have this diagonal hatching that goes along. So what we're going to do is just come along and we're going to wet the area. So check your references. We know it's going to run down the side of the de-icing leading edge de-icing boots. So we're just going to place a little bit of water, just normal water down there. Okay, and then we're just going to grab the decal. Okay, and just lift it up like this. Okay, place it roughly on the end. Okay, and then just let it lay down on the wing surface. Okay, and roll it out. Then more water, quite a lot of it, right the way over the top. That will stop it sticking down and everything else like that. So if we just bring the camera in a little bit closer and try and show you. So we've got it laying down there like that. Now what I tend to do, take a pair of scissors, and then all we do is just grab the front of it and just lightly drag the corner into position. Okay, and then you can just nudge it with the scissors. Now don't use a sharp pair of pointy scissors for this, because otherwise you scratch the paint. All you're trying to do is just walk it into position roughly. Okay, and you'll find the water sometimes like here, it's going to grab it and hold it where it is. But then once you get roughly into the area, you can start to pull it left to right, like here. And by pulling it up and down, you can sort of saw it into position of how we want it. And by using the sawing technique, it should hopefully give you more of a straight line on how it's going to go. So just pull it down and then work it back up until you can look down it and it looks straight like that. Then we've got a cotton bud here that's slightly damp. It's not dry, just that way it sucks up the water a bit easier, and then we can just roll it up the length of the decal that's down here. Okay, and it should then squash it all the way down. Okay, then have a look down, make sure you're nice and straight like we've got here, and then what we're going to do, we'll do it now, we'll grab some X20A thinners, just down like this, onto the brush, okay, and then quite a bit of it, and make sure you flood both sides, just work it down, the actual decal all the way down like this. Okay, and then step back and leave it. Make sure you've covered both sides of the decal, and that way it will just force all the water out as this dries off. But don't keep obviously brushing on it because it's acrylic, you're going to end up having paint bleed through. But if you're just placing it down there like that, you won't have a problem. It's not going to affect anything. It'll dry back dry. You might get a little bit of what we call watermarks on there, and all you use is a little bit of kitchen towel like this, wet your finger a little bit, and just give it a gentle wipe, and then it should be fine, come away. Then afterwards you can move through. Now this has obviously got loads of walkways right the way all over the top of this, and it's going to take probably a good few hours to do it all. I've also been going round, as I said before, and done the underside, and you can probably see them on the close-up over here. We've got literally lots of little ones all over this, different coloured stripes on the wings, you might be able to see to the other side, but there's lots and lots of decals. But the big trouble one are these long ones to go on. But if you take your time placing them down, lots of water, make sure you've got a couple of coats of gloss on this first as well. This is more of a satin type finish, but the decals are quite happy to slide over it, and then that way you can do it. But say, just take your time. If you get them curling up and things like that on you, place them back in the water, just leave them for a minute, and then with a couple of brushes, soft brushes, just in there and pull them out. And if you've got the original backing paper, just try and pop them back on the backing paper, put them on, pop them down, things like that. The other way of putting them on is we just re-wet this again. Okay, just place more water along. It's the actual holding it down technique. So let's say, actually we'll go to the wrist. So what you do, you place your decal on exactly where you want it, like this. Okay, and then just slide it off. So this needs to go up a little bit. Okay, and then you can just place your finger and drag it out from underneath. Now that works well if you're on a nice flat surface like that. If you're on a surface though that is slightly, shall we say, around a concurved, you can't pull it out. But that's the quick way. But doing it the other way, you can lift up, put it on and saw them into place. So really between the two, okay for flat areas, curved areas I tend to place down and push them all into place. Anyway, I'm going to carry on for this. It's going to be a good few hours work on this until we've got them all done. We'll come together at the end and talk about settling them down and stopping silvering and things like that. Okay, so as you can see, we are all nicely decaled absolutely everywhere on this one. It's pretty complex the way you go through, because obviously you've got these coloured lines running along the bottom of the wings, blue on the port wing, and then we've got orange on the starboard and things like that. So just watch your references, how you go round. There is a lot more decals to go on this one, but when I'm looking at my reference shots, some of them aren't on it anyway. So what we need to do now is have a good look round, make sure we haven't got any silvering on it, anything else like that. A couple of little techniques you can do if you have got any silvering. First thing is, if you've got one of these, now this is your straightforward riveting detail wheel, but what it does is actually put some nice holes in. So if you've got anywhere where you've got quite a bit of silvering perhaps, what you can actually do is just come along with one of these wheels. If we just bring this camera over here in a bit, you can come along with one of these, okay, place it down just on here and roll it across, and what it will do is actually pierce the carrier film itself without damaging your paintwork, because they're making nice holes straight down, and perhaps then you can follow it along as you go up and down. Then come back with your chosen decal softener, just like this, clean brush, okay, and then just pick up a little bit in here, and then just brush it on. Okay, and if you still see them after that, then obviously you can use a pin or perhaps a little blade or a scribing tool, something like that. Blade here, and you can just literally tap and pick out any silvering you've got. Now remember, this isn't a one-shot thing. You can keep coming back to this all the time. The only thing you want to do is allow it to totally dry off. Don't keep coming back on this time after time after time. Otherwise what's going to happen is you're going to find you're going to actually destroy the decal as you go over. The other thing as well, when you're doing it, if you've got a situation like this where you've got decals that are sitting over the top of a panel line, you've got a panel line running down, before you put decal softener on there, put your blade in there and just scrape it through the actual panel line itself. Just follow it through, don't dig down, just scratch right through it. Okay, and what you'll find is, again, come along with your set or softener solution and just give it a gentle rub right the way over your decals, and you'll find that it will help conform them on there, make them wrap around and everything else down there like that. But you can see it really does, you know, help it out and come through. And then when you put the wash on, you won't get the situation where you put the wash down and it stops because it's getting pushed over the actual where the decal carrier film is and things like that. So that's the decaling done. Okay, with all the sort of decaling dry and everything else, it still needs an overcoat to protect it before we come on with the washing. But what we need to do, we're going to give it a flat coat so it's got more texture to grip to, which will give more dirt then, will actually stick to the model and give it a more grimy look. So then by the time we flatten it down, a little bit of post shading after that, it should really look the business. But to keep this sort of continuity going of everything, what we're going to do is put the undercarriage all on it and things like that. So when we come along with the flat coat, we can flat coat it all in one. Now one of the big things is the wheels. Now obviously there's lots of wheels with this, and we've painted these already just with tyre black. Okay, and we've covered painting pretty extensively before, wheels, things like that. Just to recap, all we tend to do is go around with the wheels like this, and then as you can see, green on the inside, tyre black on the outside, and then what I do, I actually thin down a little bit of paint and pop it in and let it track around the actual groove. That way you get a nice smooth line going with between the tyre and the hub, which is just a little trick, but as I say, there's videos of that on the site. So what we need to do is go around and pop these in. So we've got this main part of the undercarriage in here, and that is going to fit just down in here. Now because we've already half built the area, it's a little bit tricky to get it all in. Okay, but basically it's going to sit in there just like that. Now we're going to use poly cement here, liquid glues, purely because it will help it melt in, and we want it to be nice and strong and permanent, where if you're using super glues, things like that, they can be a bit of a problem. So we should be able to just sit that in like that, and we've got the rear leg, which we just need to pop down into this groove down in here, which is its sort of rear strengthener. Give that a bit of a push. Again, liquid cement going down in there, and we're going to let that totally dry off, but that's down in there. As you can see, it's just, catch it in the light, you can see it a little bit better, but fits in. And then what we can do then, we can go around and put the wheels on. So if we just bring that camera out just a fraction, just so you can cover some more. Okay, so we're going to take the wheels. Now, obviously you sort of cheat here. Pick your best wheels and have them to the outside. So have a look at them all, line them all up and say, well, that's a particularly nicely painted one. That one's probably not. Okay, and obviously have the napper ones on the inside. Not saying that mine are obviously naff, but obviously we all have ones that are better than others. So you've got two at the front, which is easy to spot because they have a deeper hub. So that's one for the front. And then that's two, they're the two front ones. So what we're going to do is just go along now and have a look for the good ones versus the naff ones. So we're going to put a bit of liquid cement on the outside, just like that, and then we're just going to come along. Also got to feed them in, pop them in, then once they're in, a little bit more liquid cement. Then what we can do, we can flatten these afterwards, give them a flat spot. So obviously it's a little bit more convincing to have commonly known as weight on wheels, and that's where the tyre, under the weight of the aircraft, pushes down slightly, because you tend to be quite low air pressure on these. So obviously they're better equipped for rough landings and things like that. So we just pop those on. Right, now what we want to do is make sure they're obviously all square. So you don't want them obviously pigeon-toeing or pulling out, things like that. So we just go along to these other ones and pop these on. Just like this. Now the secret, or the problem we'll have with this, is getting them all to be obviously facing the right direction. And then of course we want them to all be level, because obviously we've got double gear here and with the front, and we've got the tail ramp. So when we settle this down, we might have to jiggle it a little bit, adding a little bit of pressure to move the suspension, for want of a better word, but obviously in our case it'll be the entire undercarriage, to make sure it's all good. So we just put that in. We're going to have a look at them straight down just to see, but that gives us our gear looking just like that. Now we've got doors and things that are going to go on, but to be honest we'll put them on afterwards. And then we've got to go around here. As you can probably see down here, we've got exhaust filters, APU units, things like that. They've all got to be painted up, exhausts have got to be put on, and everything else. A lot of the metal colours, certainly like we've got down here, we've got the propellers, things like that. So they'll all be done separate once the flat coat is on, once the wash is on, everything else like that. The other thing you probably noticed down the back here, we've installed the rear ramp. That one's been put on and put in. Literally a bit of glue at the end here. Once the glue's started to go tacky, pushed it into position, and now it's held its own weight quite nicely. So we don't want to put too much weight on this front gear yet, because obviously we've only just glued it in. But and the other thing we know is that this won't actually sit correctly. So we just line up this gear, make sure we're not pigeon-toeing and things. Because obviously the ramp is going to take the weight. So when this is turned upside down, the ramp's going to be in the downward position, which will hold this up and stop it being a tail sitter, unless you have filled it up with lead like we showed in the early days, and everything else, and it's not a tail sitter. But the trouble is, talking to some other people who have built this kit during the way, if you do fill it up with lead, this rear gear does tend to give up after a while. So if you are doing it with a ramp up and things like that, a little technique is to put a little hole just somewhere in the middle here, tiny little bit of acrylic rod coming down in clear so you can't see it, and that will just help spread the weight, because this gear is particularly low tech, shall we say, on the back. It's obviously not designed like the real thing. There's some very small parts which hold it all together. So what I'm going to do, we're going to let this dry off, start to dry off everything else like that. We'll move over to the spray bay and we'll show you about flat coating. Okay, so here we are back over at the spray bay. Now, when you come in with flats, we're just going to cover a little bit on flat coats, things like that. Obviously, you can go out and buy other people's types of flat. We've got Valero flat here. You know, obviously this is not sort of on test or anything. For value, this is brilliant. £9, and you've got here half a litre of flat. I like this flat. It's quite nice because it's easy to spray. It cleans up well, very nicely, things like that. Unfortunately, though, it's more of a, we call satin or semi-matte type of finish, okay? So it's great for doing sort of modern military jets, but if you want something weathered down, I find this stuff doesn't quite give us that dead flat. When I say dead flat, I mean dead flat, no shininess at all. So it's a nice flat, but not probably up to everything else. Flat base that I've got here, this here is a mix of Tamiya flat base, okay, mixed with Future or clear gloss, things like that, and that way you can matten it down yourself as you go. Again, nothing wrong with making your own this way, and I do use it a lot for various bits and pieces. The only thing is, if you're using it for the first time, it can give you a, shall we say, non-consistent finish, because sometimes you might get little white flecks in it where the flat base is in there, things like that. Don't get confused with Tamiya flat base being a flat coat. All that is a base to put with other satin finishes, gloss finishes, flat finishes to flatten it down even more. Never use it on its own because it won't work. It's completely horrible. I'm just looking to see if I've got a pot of it in front of me on my paint thing here, and I don't. So I don't even own one anymore because, as I say, oh, I do. tell a lie, here it is. It's actually X21 flat base. If you ever look at it, it looks like toothpaste in a thing. A lot of people put it in their airbrush and think you can spray it on. Unfortunately, if you do that, your model will just turn to like Snow White, and it can make a complete mess, and it's horrible to get off and everything else. So never use flat base as a flat coat. It is literally a flattening agent to mix with other paints. You come along, and if you wanted a dead flat yellow, then obviously you'd add a little bit of flat base to the mix, give it a good mix, thin it, spray it, and away you go. But it will not work as a standalone item. I know a lot of people have done it. Certainly you guys on the forum have all done it. I've done it. Everybody's done it. But it's just one of those things. Okay, here we've got a flat base, which this one here is a mixture I've made myself. Now this is literally that I call a flat base. It's a mixture of extra acrylics, flat, okay, a little bit of flat base as well, and everything else. The only trouble with it is it doesn't keep very long, and then if you've had it kicking around a while, you might be able to see it just in here. It sticks, it doesn't really mix anything else. It's great for a one-off, but it doesn't keep in a bottle. So I've got a bottle of it, but I wouldn't use it. If you want a straightforward dead flat finish, what I always recommend is extra acrylics flat varnish. Okay, this is made by Hand Stuff. This stuff you can actually spray neat, and I know a lot of people say you can't, but if you see my videos you know I do. First thing you need to do is turn your air pressure up to maximum on your compressor, no matter what it does and goes up to. Mine maximum here is we are shooting at, oh, it's got to power up a bit, it's down a little bit. Mine is going to go up to a whopping 15, 30, 45 psi. Okay, but to be honest, that's not real. It's probably 40 psi when you pull the trigger because it's settling back. Okay, so we just put the bigger colour cup on here. Now what we're going to do is just put a little bit of acrylic thinners into the colour cup and shoot it through, because I want to make sure this is coming through completely clear, because if it's not coming through clear, then obviously whatever we put into it is going to colour as well. So we got the flat base. Okay, first thing to do is give it a good old shake. This stuff will separate like everything else. Okay, and to be honest, it's been sitting around on the desk since the last time I did a flat coat, which is probably about 2 weeks ago. So give this a good old shake. Now what happens is this stuff isn't consistent. It's not the same all the way through. Obviously it thins at the top, gets heavier at the bottom, and if this was a clear one you'd probably see goo stuck at the bottom and everything else like that. If that goo down the bottom gets in your airbrush, it will stop instantly and you won't be able to spray it. So what you do, you let it, give it a good old shake around, everything else like that, and let it stand just for a few moments to let all the large particles and gooey bits, for want of a better word, settle down to the bottom. So when we pour it out and we decant it into the colour cup, only the nice bits come through. It's very hard to see the difference in the big bits to the little bits because it's thick white, it looks like white paint going in your colour cup and everything else. The other thing to make sure is, make sure you've got no dust, no bits and pieces all over your model. So give it a quick blow over with your airbrush. Okay, and get rid of all the dusty bits, because what will happen is they will just stick with your flat coat onto your model. So if you've done any sanding like I have this morning, you don't want those on your model. Now the gear is still soft because, say, we've brought it straight from the other bench over to here. Okay, so I'm not going to put it down on its gear, we'll just keep it on its roof. Okay, so taking the top, when you unscrew this stuff, you'll probably see you get lumps around the top and everything else. So just be careful and aware. So when you pour it into your cup, just watch it go down. Pour it slowly and look for any lumps. If you see a big lump go in there, then you need to pour it. Now you might be able to see this stuff here is like complete toothpaste. It's very, very thick, but trust me, get your air pressure up nice and high. This is the 0.2mm needle, so if you've got anything bigger than a 0.2mm, i.e. perhaps the Iwata standard 0.35, it will shoot this out. Okay, maximum air pressure as we said, and then what we're going to do is just lightly blow it over. Now the decals that come with Revell are matte finish anyway, so what you need to do is matte the area around it to those, okay? So when you're coming in, nice light coat, okay? Not a heavy coat, okay? And we're gonna go around once. All over it. Okay, just giving it a light coat to start with. We're not trying to go over the top here. You might be able to see it flattening off as we go over the area. Okay. Then stop. Check the end of your needle. Okay. What you're looking for is any build up on the end. When you're spraying thick things, you tend to get it. If you've got the round needle protector guard, like a gun barrel on the end, it will build up even faster than it will here. But just keep an eye on it, because if you get any build up, it will spit onto here and you'll get white spots all over it. So we're just going to do the underside for the moment. Okay. And we just keep going over. So making sure we flatten down the gear, the tyres, all these areas, and you're just putting over a secondary coat. But what you're trying to do, if you've got any watermarks on your model and things like that, just stay on those areas, okay, and you can flatten them down. So again, checking the end of the needle, making sure we're all clear. If you're happy, and then come back and pass down another layer. You can probably see on camera we're starting to get a nice flat finish. Then when you get a decal that's particularly thick, okay, on an area, and you can still see it, just give it an extra bit over the top until the decal disappears, and it will physically disappear. Okay, then go off, go somewhere else, because all you're trying to do is build up a small layer of flat between the carrier film and the paintwork, and just mould it over so it disappears. Also, I said, if you've got any watermarks, give it a little bit more over those, and you'll find that they'll disappear. So you're just going to do up on the inside, slightly down here. Now, so you've got to be a bit careful handling this one, because you can probably see already we are starting to flatten the back. And if this dries, it will die off. So I'm just going to come around now, just on the insides. Check the needles, all clean. If you find your airbrush stops at any point and won't come out, just take it off to one side, pump the needle until you get it coming through again. It's important to have a clean nozzle cap, things like that, because it's thick paint, it will build up in there, but just making sure it's all coming through clear. As I say, we quite heavily gloss these areas. You can hear it's probably having a hard time, but you might be seeing now it's dying, killing this off, looking flat. Because what we're trying to do is kill this completely to make it look completely dead flat. But as I say, if you get any areas where you've got watermarks, just give it a bit extra right on those and you'll see it blend in. So the underside isn't really important, but you can probably see now we've lost any shine under here. But also you will lose any blemishes, shall we say, or imperfections. So make sure you do things like tyres, because then it will give it that nice, dead, flat finish to it all. So just your decal, just get right in there and give it some stick. And just blend them in. Take out your high and low spot areas. And as you can see now, we've lost pretty much all the shine to this one. So what we're going to do is just let that dry down. Don't let this thick stuff stay in your colour cup. Pour it out, clean out your airbrush, and then redecant in there and go again. But as you can see, it completely kills it off to a nice flat finish now. We've lost all the shine in there. So now what we can do is literally just keep going through this, keep building up the areas, and then what we'll do is I'll show you in a moment, once we've done all the rest of it, I'll show you about giving it a final sort of death coat to really knock it dead flat. So as you can see, completely dead flat finish now without thinning paint and all the rest of it. And I know a lot of people say, oh, you can't do it. Well, there you go, you've just seen it. Okay, so we've got the paint left in here. So what we want to do now is let this come through. Got a bit of trouble with the paint coming through, so we're just going to redecant back in. Get rid of most of it because it is pretty thick and gooey. Okay, we're going to just take a tiny few drops of thinners in there, so not much at all, as you can probably see, and then we're just going to give it a good old mix. Okay, now all the tricky part now, we've got to get that to come through. So we just need to pump out the old stuff, get the new stuff in, which can be a bit of a problem because it tends to dry on the needle. Right, there we go, coming through now. Now you might not see this, I'm hoping you can. What we do, we come from a long distance off and we just put in a very, very light misty coat onto this. What's happening is it's coming in and drying. You can feel the fact, get these little shiny areas like we have just down here, you can kill it off. Because what's happening is that because we're doing it from sort of about a foot away, the actual paint is drying before it gets to the top. It touches the top and dries like sandpaper, which is normally one thing you're trying to avoid at all costs. But what this does is give it a complete flat look, dusty look to itself. All over. The only trouble is you do get the odd little spot up here. Does mean we can go all over it just like this to knock it completely back, and every now and again we'll just try to dust. So we say it's drying en route, so it's just a fine misty coat all coming out. I don't know if you can see it, but it looks quite nice going down on. Okay. There we go, just like that. And that is our coat done. So if we just bring this camera in, you might be able to see got a totally nice flat finish to the paintwork. We're not shiny anywhere at all. Bring you back a little bit. As you can see, just like that. And that is how you get a complete dead flat coat. If you're after satin, anything else, then obviously you'd thin your paint and things like that. But from our point of view, for a dead flat finish, we want like this, so the weathering's got something really to stick to and things like that. That's how we do it.